Are you ready for this? The great Varley sized me up as he cupped a small plastic ball in his hand. I rolled my left shoulder and got into a stance. As I'll ever be. He smirked. That was the last I saw of his face. My eyes became glued to the ball as, almost as if in slow motion, it floated through the air. From this point on, the only thing that mattered was winning. Varley's paddle rolled over the ball and thrust it forward. Topspin, I thought, as I instinctively took a step backwards. The ball cascaded across the table, narrowly missing the net and accelerating with each contact. My hand was already in motion. My paddle dampened the blow, and I flicked my wrist sideways. Let's see how you like this, I thought to myself as I imbued a side spin into my return. The ball curved left, and it managed to bounce upon the white line of the table's left edge. The topspin he put on the ball is no joke, I thought, as I prepared for Varley's counterattack. Gonna have to be careful. A chill shot my spine. Oh no. A sense of dread came over me as I realized what I had done. Varley's body was taut, his arm pulled back like a spring ready to snap forward. Not bad, he remarked, sounding genuinely impressed. His right arm exploded forward and slammed into the ball. I couldn't even get my paddle in front of it. The ball catapulted forward with tremendous power and connected with the side of my table, then flew away to the far corner of the room. Varley lowered his arm and sneered at me, his voice dripping with contempt. But not good enough. The table tennis ball, still spinning from the hit, kicked up a little dust cloud as it continued to drive itself along the ground, almost as if it didn't realize the point was won and it could give up spinning now. I looked back to my opponent, all 6'5" of him. This is going to be rough, I realized, and I bit my lower lip. 14 games. 14 games of slam after slam after slam. It was all I could do to return his powerful hits, let alone my own attacks get in. I looked at the scoreboard behind me. 12-2, Varley's favor. Sweat dripped from my brow. I took a deep breath and served. My ball came back to me like a traitor, and it connected on my side just before curving out of my reach. It clattered to the ground, the sound of its bouncing on the concrete floor echoing off the walls. Well, Varley tucked his right arm behind his head and gave his biceps a stretch. Looks like that's another point for me. He meandered over to the board and put another tally beneath his name. He wasn't even trying anymore. At the start, he brought his A game, but at this point he was more relaxed. We both knew that he didn't have to go all out to beat me. Don't feel bad, he consoled. Me and my buddies at uni play every dime between classes. He flipped up his paddle in the air and let it land back into his palm. And besides, you got a few games on me. Most people can't even do that, so I would say you're not half bad. With a little more, how much time do we have before you leave? I cut him off, my eyes fixed to the ground. Varley glanced over his shoulder at the clock. I don't know, 30 minutes or so? He broke into a revealing smile. What, have you had enough? My eyes didn't even leave the ground. And we started this at 5, right? Varley shrugged. Something like that. So if I leave at 6, then I guess this would be halfway? Why do you ask? I lifted my chin, and my eyes pierced into his. An uncontrollable, sadistic grin had escaped onto my face, and there was no containing it now. My tone was infused with ego. I thought it was time I should start trying, that's all. For a second, fear flashed across Varley's expression, but it was gone just as quickly as it appeared. What, you think getting cocky's gonna help? He chuckled. Being a tryhard isn't all it takes to win, you know. He grabbed the ball off the floor and brought it back to the table. But hey, maybe that fighting spirit of yours will make a difference. Only one way to find out. He served the ball, and it skipped across the tabletop. For a millisecond, my gaze met Varley's, and my eyes whispered a single word. Mistake. My paddle slammed into the ball, and the blur connected with Varley's side of the table. He blinked twice. He couldn't even react. After a few moments of stupor, he shook himself free, and muttered something about a lucky hit. He tried to grab the ball, but it evaded his grasp through the topspin still writhing within it. After a few more attempts, he managed to grab it, and he returned to the table. All right, fine. I'll give you that one. But how do you like this? With the final word, his paddle shot the ball across the table. It was almost twice as fast as his last serve. I didn't even hesitate. My arm swung forward as if it had a mind of its own, and it hurled the ball with ungodly speed and accuracy onto the far right corner of his table. Varley tried to reach it, but he wasn't even close. I threw up my hands. Oh man! My words dripped with sarcasm. I guess you're right. I really do need to improve. I intend to hit the ball a centimeter more to the left. I let my words hang in the air as the uncontrollable grin remained painted across my face. Sure you did, William retorted with a puff. All right, let's see what happens when you serve. I rolled my shoulder. Why not? I tossed the ball in the air, and as it fell, I raced my paddle alongside it, commanding it to do my bidding. The ball bounced high into the air, and Varley capitalized on what was an all too perfect set for a point-taking slam. But his paddle didn't connect. The ball, as if directed by an unseen hand, curved outward just beyond Varley's reach. It was too late now. The table tennis ball gently kissed the tabletop before bouncing away. I donned an exaggerated expression of concern. Is there a hole in your paddle? I asked, sounding almost sincere. "Ah!" Varley growled. "Try that again!" My appearance retained its conceited composure, and I sneered back. "It would be my pleasure." I gave Varley the exact same serve, and once again his paddle hit nothing but air. He stared daggers at me. "How are you doing this?" he growled. "What, me?" I feigned ignorance. "I'm just trying now, that's all." "Fine," Varley huffed, and he got into his stance for his serve. "But I'm ready now, so don't think your tricks are going to work like they did before." With a fire in his eyes, he fired his signature topspin attack and stepped back, ready for the blast of power that would inevitably follow. But it never came. My paddle sliced through the air like a hot knife through butter and found its way beneath the ball to cradle it, like an egg amongst a bed of feathers. Then, with a delicate push and a backward flick of the wrist, the ball floated over the net. Varley sprung forward, desperate to keep the ball alive, even if it was just barely, but the ball hit the table and it leapt back from Varley's advance and threw itself into the net, as if trying with all its might to escape the beast before it, and come back to the one who would handle it so gently. Varley fumed, and frenzy ignited in his eyes. "This is not happening!" he screamed as he snatched up the ball and served once more. The ball sped across the table, and by the time I was done with it, the turbo had been turned, and it connected with Varley's side of the table. "Ah!" Varley let out a war cry and recklessly attempted a slam despite the inopportune position of the ball. Yet by some miracle it worked. The ball, hardly a blur, that cleared the net and collided with my side of the table. "Yes!" Varley screamed. "Take that!" His triumph turned to despair as he saw the ball clatter back across the side of the table. His eyes found mine, and as if wounded, he seemed to say, how could anyone return that?" My steel-cold, arrogant glare exhibited not a shred of sympathy. I walked over and grabbed the ball. "So the score is 6-0, right?" As the evening wore on, Varley's demeanor mutated from rage to hysteria. At the start, he simply tried harder, and while his play did improve, it wasn't near enough to beat me. Thus, with each tally added to my side of the scoreboard, he grew more and more desperate. His playstyle became reckless, and once that only further entrenched him in his losses, his play became drenched in hopeless hysteria. Like before, he ceased to even try, but this time because he realized by doing so, he would only embarrass himself further. His arrogance melted into shame as game after game he lost to an opponent he once thought inferior. And me? I loved it all. I drank in his despair until I intoxicated myself, a perfect cocktail brewed by my own hand. And as the clock struck 6, the final score was 13-23 in my favor. And there you have it, the tale of William and my table tennis game, with some significant dramatization. I feel like a disclaimer should be given about what actually happened, though, just so you don't think I'm a jerk. See, what actually occurred is William and I played like the first 14 games with me using my left hand, though he didn't know that. And though I did all right, it was clear he was better than me. Now, going into it, I wasn't sure if I was going to switch my right hand at all, because, it's fun to know you have an unused trump card. But then around game 14 or so, William just got super cocky. Like, he stopped playing me like a serious opponent and just started talking so much smack. And he was a little, like, patronizing, as I detailed in the story. So at that point, the gloves were off. And what followed was absolutely hilarious. These are the 5 stages of table tennis grief for William, and I got to watch him go through them in each stage in the following order: disbelief, confusion, anger, hysteria, and then finally acceptance. Honestly, unlike how I portrayed myself, it was actually, like, so funny, and I could not stop laughing. Like, watching William go through all these 5 stages of emotion as the games progressed was actually one of the funniest things I've seen in ages. Especially the anger phase. Like, he was genuinely furious he could not beat me, even though he was putting everything he had into it. And it was honestly so funny to watch. Saving my right hand until the second half was by far the most fulfilling decision I've made in the last 6 months. Absolute comedy gold. Of course, I'm not sure William thought so. He actually mandatorily postponed our final goodbye because he was so vexed that he couldn't have wished me well off, even if he tried. But from my point of view, it was so worth it. I think the whole experience might have taught him not to be arrogant, just because, he thinks he's better than someone. Character building moment, right? However, aside from comedy, I've got to say the best part was having the anime-like overcoming scene. You see, like every anime ever, your team is losing, and then after they really start to get serious and someone like gives an inspiring speech, they always come back and just like obliterate the enemy. And of course, I've never had that moment before because, well, that's not how life works. Just trying really hard doesn't make you win. But having 2 levels of skill and saving the high level for last meant that I got to have the overcoming experience, and it was so cool. Like, it feels so much better than go from being the underdog to the champion than just being the champion all along. So I think in the future, I'm going to try and like set myself up for more moments like that. So yeah, anyway, that's how the actual table tennis match went, and it's become one of my more cherished memories. After writing the last live email on the Varley's computer, I then left for dinner at the first house and journeyed to my next abode. Once I got to the first, I played some table tennis with Michael and Taylor, and then we had dinner, which was nice after eating only dried apricots and canned food. And then we tried playing some Minecraft, but that went exceptionally poorly, as the 4 children do not make good Minecraft buddies. Michael and Rissy are at each other's throats, and Taylor just does his own thing. So it was more like vengeful chaos than cooperative gameplay. And I mean, that's not always bad. Back when Brawl Boys turned into Mind Men, it was like kind of like that too. But the difference was, even though we were competing against each other, it was still a good spirited competition, and we'd have like trading opportunities and stuff. However, this game of Minecraft, it was definitely not a trade permitting kind of game. And perhaps that's due to the fact that, it was a new world, we hadn't established stuff yet, and the, screens were really small, etc. But for whatever reason, not the vibe I was hoping for Minecraft to be. So after that ended, I was not eager to go back to it. After Minecraft came to a close, Mr. Firth came to me, brought me to the Ark, and gave me a brief tour of the place, showing me my room and all that. The Ark is a lot like Capernwray in the way it's laid out, a few communal buildings which are cobbled together, and then a dorm room and bunk beds. However, even though the place was a little bit jank, it felt, pretty comfortable for me. Maybe because it reminded me of Capernwray so much. So yeah, got situated, and then basically went to bed. The next day was not peaceful sleeping in, though, because previously Elkin informed me of yet another, much shorter road trip for the similar purpose as the one engaged in previously, and I agreed, though hesitantly. A large part of the hesitancy was due to the fact that I had to get up at like 6:45 in the morning to get there on time, but I did it, and I proceeded to drive all the way down to Hamilton to meet up with him, which was like a 45-minute drive from the Ark, so that definitely sucked, because, gas is so expensive here. That meant I roughly paid 40 New Zealand dollars just to get to Elkin's place and back, which really makes you reconsider driving places. Honestly, I don't think it was worth it in the end. We drove around 3 hours in total to pick up this lemon of a car, and that was the event. See, Elkin and I had already talked about all the life stuff in our previous, massive drive, so all that was left was philosophical stuff, which, don't get me wrong, I love talking about. But unfortunately, Elkin could not remember anything I told him. The whole way there, and about half the way back, I went over various ethical systems and problems of evil and stuff, and arguments for God's existence. And then I was like, all right, let's go over what we talked about so you can remember better. And he could remember none of it. So, for the last, half the drive, I tried to help him remember, but to no avail. That's why I don't think it was worthwhile, and I'm pretty sure Elkin got, nothing out of the drive. However, afterward, I did get to talk to Elkin's sisters and mom, which made the whole trip worth it. See, prior to me getting the chance to talk to them, Michael had informed me that the youngest of Elkin's sisters, Emmanuel, had a unique tendency, which I found very intriguing, and that piqued my curiosity. Unfortunately, that practice was not supposed to be disclosed, so apparently Michael wasn't even supposed to know about it in the first place. But regardless, it hinted at the fact that Emmanuel had a rich inner life. And as you all know, people with robust inner lives intrigue me. Hence, I was very excited when I got the chance to talk to her. And it turns out she doesn't have so much of a deep inner life as she has the capacity for a deep inner life. But, I suppose that's to be expected because she's only 16. So yeah, regardless, my curiosity was satiated and I got to talk to her, as well as Gabriel and Elkin's mom, about a lot of philosophical issues, which I deeply enjoyed, and that was a good time. Dominic, Elkin's last sister, acted pretty strangely for a significant amount of time while I was around. She also really wanted to know my food preferences. And while I have my suspicions as to the cause of her odd behavior, I'm not confident enough in my intuitions to give a conclusion. Regardless, she did convince me of the Burger Field burger, and I would say that conversation was not without any merit, because I did later get that burger. Honestly, though, it wasn't that good. I would take a Five Guys burger over that kind of burger any day. Unless I was trying to be healthy. And then I'd take the Burger Field burger. But who eats a burger while trying to be healthy? So yeah. After they kindly made me dinner, and I talked their ears off for ages, I then said my goodbyes and head over to the first for some table tennis with Taylor. And that was decent. Taylor and I had some 5 out of 10 quality conversations while hitting the ball around, and then I went back to the Ark, watched a bit of anime, and went to sleep. The next day was a really slow start, as I slept in for ages, since I didn't get much sleep the night before. Though I must say, the whole time I stayed at the Ark, even though most of the time I stayed... Oh, and even most of the time I spent at Glenn and Mag's place, I averaged 12 hours of sleep a night, which is a ton of sleep. Don't underestimate how much, of my time in the second half of the New Zealand trip was spent sleeping. Honestly, though, sleeping just is great. I'm not sure why, but it just makes the whole rest of the day super chill. I would like to sleep 12 hours a night, always and ever, please. Is that too much to ask of life? Anyway, I slept in for ages, had breakfast and stuff, and then went to William. And then William came over and the epic table tennis showdown occurred. I then watched some science YouTube videos before Taylor came over and we played some more table tennis until it was time for bed. He brought over Bundabergs, and some other snacks, as well as a speaker for music, and we just vibed while hitting the ball back and forth. I think table tennis really is such a good game. It could be as chill or as intense as the players want it to be, and it's also something that's really good to do while talking. I bet if all political debates took place over table tennis, the world would be a better place. Once Taylor headed back, I just chilled in my little top bunk seat I made with pillows and watched anime until I went to bed. That's a funny thing I noticed about myself. While I was at the Ark, and, thinking back, I've always been like this, I've always really liked having my own little space in the corner, the top bunk. The 2-wall corner, mind you, not, any other corner. Granted, you utilize a few pillows to, support your back and stuff. It's actually really nice. Good place to sit and watch a show, read a book, maybe work on a paper. The next day, I finished my philosophy memorization as I finished the section I'd set out to memorize. And then I recorded my last life of email, which took absolutely ages because the thing was so long. I started reading a book largely against my will, and that's a kind of funny situation. See, previously, while I was waiting for William to arrive, I decided to look through the Ark's massive amount of books that cover the wall, with an intent to pull something to read. Since my computer wasn't fixed and I had no way of working on my paper, there wasn't really many options for me. Hence, I spent 30 minutes looking through, and I pulled out 5 books. Maybe I'm kind of interested in reading, but only if I'm sufficiently bored. And then I came back to continue the bookshelf perusing. However, once I got there, I ran into this guy named Justin, who I learned after the fact that he was the guy who actually let me stay at the Ark. So retroactively, thank you, Justin, even though you'll never read this. Anyway, so Justin starts talking with me, and while I'm, not opposed to the conversation to start off with, it gets increasingly awkward and punctuated with various periods of like 10-second silence. And I'm not sure if Justin realized it was awkward or not, but after each of those silences, he would continue the conversation and push it down another line of ultimately meaningless inquiry. So our conversation was something like this. Justin: I see. So what do you do? Me: oh, I'm studying to become a mechanical engineer. It's pretty rough, though. Definitely more of a challenge than I thought it would be. Insert 10 seconds of awkward silence. Justin: what do you find so challenging about it? Me: I mean, a few things. First off, electrical engineering is rough. The first time in my life I've actually failed a class. But besides that, it's a really big time commitment, a lot of work. Not to mention like high levels of math of diff EQ and just pain. Justin grunts understandably. Another 5 seconds of awkward silence. Me: so what are you up to right now? Justin: just doing a bit of maintenance around the place. Me: oh, well, don't let me keep you. I was just coming down here to look at books, that's all. Justin: it's no trouble. How long are you here for? Me: about 2 more weeks. Though I'll only be here at the Ark for another week or so. Thanks so much for letting me stay, by the way. It's a really nice place. Justin: yeah, it's not too bad. Another installment of 10 awkward seconds of silence. Justin: so how are your parents doing? And that's how the conversation went for at least 5 minutes. I gave him conversationals out like every chance I could, but he did not seem to pick up on the normal cues for, I would like to stop talking now. Hence, after ages of awkward back and forth, I realized I needed to use a more forceful method of escape. Thus, I brought the conversation around to books, and then asked if he knew what happened to the books I had set aside from the shelf. Justin showed me where he put them on the shelf, and, spotting the bright red cover of 1984, I grabbed it and effectively said, "Ah, look, what I came down here for! Thanks for showing me where this was, and now I'm going to actively walk toward the door so I can get away from here and read this." Hence, with a little force, I managed to extract myself from the conversation and make it safely back to my room. However, once there, I couldn't just not read 1984 after I said I was explicitly going to do so. So I started reading the book. And the whole experience made me realize just how much I, take advantage of subtle social cues that I've just come to master. Like the fact that I can, drop certain sentences that mean I want to leave while saying something entirely different, and then my conversation picks up on the fact that those subtle cues mean that, and responds in a way to end the conversation is actually astounding. Like what I said was, I don't want to keep you from your work, but what I meant was, stop talking to me now. And I expect that everyone recognizes the second meaning is what I actually intend and will, consequently act in accordance. But the fact that Justin thought what I meant was what I actually said and proceeded to point out that he didn't feel inconvenienced, thinking he addressed the issue, made me realize just how far I've come socially. Like for ages, I was just like Justin, unaware of the subtle social game being played and all the double meanings behind words. Yet, being powered up by Alex 2.0, it's like all becomes clear. It's absurd how much I've not only learned, but also adopted the rules that everyone else plays by. Because not only do I understand them now, but I'm good at them, at least partially. One thing I've noticed since coming back to New Zealand and being outside my typical social circles is that I am inconceivably better in social situations than I was before. Like, not only do I understand the rules by the way I was, in the same way that others understand them, but I've become proficient at playing with them. It turns out I'm actually really good at the social game now, and the shift is palpable for me. It honestly makes so many things make sense. The reason I hated small talk before, at least one of the reasons, was because I didn't understand the rules of the game, and even when I did understand, I wasn't proficient at play. Yet deep talk, as you might call it, plays by entirely different rules, and through dedicated effort, I have become very good at playing that kind of social game. Thus, I always wanted to move the conversations from the area I knew how to play poorly in to the area I wanted to play well in. But now that I'm practicing the small talk area, perhaps even an expert, oddly enough, I've honestly found it quite enjoyable. Almost as enjoyable as deep talk. It's a whole different ballgame, and there's the differences, but now that I'm good at it, it's actually a really fun one to play. I'm not quite sure I'm to the point where it's natural. I have to enter into a sort of mode. And at times, I'm broken from my flow state and have to try and remind myself how the game is played. Nevertheless, the difference in my skill set in that area is literally night and day. So it's been really cool to see. The second thing my encounter with Justin brings to mind is just how odd it is that we play the social game the way we do. I don't mind it so much now that I'm good at it. And in fact, I think proficiency reduces the striking nature of the oddity. But the fact that we say things that have no connection with our intended meaning is really odd behavior. Why not just say, I would like this conversation to end now, please, instead of going about it in this roundabout, can you guess what I really mean sort of way? And of course, the proposal I've made sounds incalculably rude, but, why is saying, well, I wouldn't want to keep you from your work any less rude? Everyone who's trained in the social language could tell that I don't want to keep you really means that, what it really means. It's not like I've somehow tricked my conversation partner or he's been deceived in any way whatsoever. I wouldn't want to keep you from your work, as opposed to I would like this conversation to end. Like, they have like the same meaning. The meaning of the first sentence is just as clear to him as the second, but for some reason we've contrived this convoluted game where you must present the request upon using words that do not mean what you say. If you do otherwise, you're called rude. And, all that means is you suck at this game. But, the game, as far as I can tell, has no objective merit. It's like currency, only valuable because everyone uses it and considers it such. You know what? I just have a revelation, and I don't think that's actually true. As I think about it, there is a unique utility to the social game. The social game is kind of like gambling. Each person comes to the table with their own sum of social value and then proceeds to engage in the rules of the game by various bets and bargains in an attempt to increase this social value and make it more than the amount they came in with. At least, that's often the goal. But social value is also the currency because we can use to manipulate others to your will. So that's what social gravity really is. Hence, of course, everyone gambles for more of it, and because the more you have, the more you can control those around you, and those, of course, can be cashed out for renewable, tangible goods. I see how it all works now. That's why people love to play the social game, and that's also why those who are bad at it don't like to play, because the people who win walk away with power, and the people who lose walk away as their slaves. That's to exaggerate, of course, but, I think it's accurate nonetheless. Kind of a dark interpretation of social interactions, not gonna lie. I'm sure there's more to it than that, but, nevertheless, that seems like that's partially accurate. Anyway, all that aside, I managed to get out of the conversation with Justin, and because of the cognitive distance, began reading 1984. After a while of reading, I watched some anime, read some more of the book, ate dinner with the first, and then tried to play Starvio. However, neither of the first boys liked it very much, so we switched over to Daipyo, and they enjoyed that a lot more. I ended up being the one with the biggest score, 65,000, by the way. Once I got back to my room at the Arc, I just read more of 1984 and proceeded to watch a bit of anime. Next morning, I woke up and watched some more of the anime, but mostly I just read 1984 for ages. I then, once again, went over to the first for dinner, and after that, I brought Michael back with me at the Arc to play some table tennis. He actually did way better than I thought he would, almost matching the natural play with my right hand. However, he was notably weak against... he had some notable weaknesses, so I started exploiting those, and I won, every game. Also, oddly enough, when I played with my left hand, I won almost every game. So for some reason, even though my left hand is objectively worse, the defensive playstyle I played with my left hand is, Michael's kryptonite. Still, I think we both had a good time, and we got a lot of games in, so that was fun. Also, Michael's got, Mike and I got to witness this creepy prayer chants from this Asian guy who was praying in the room behind us. I was telling Mr. Firth about them because they sounded kind of like a ritual from some ancient religion, but I guess wherever he's from, that's just how they pray. Also, I've got to say, that man had dedication. He went on chanting for 2.5 hours straight, and he wasn't even done by the time we left. He should be he should stop being Protestant and go be a Byzantine monk or something. I think he'd find it much more fulfilling. Once I returned Michael to his dwelling place, I then read 1984 till I finally finished it at midnight. That book was honestly very good and really got me thinking, so I started writing down those thoughts and continued to do so until about 2 a.m. So if anyone is interested in those, just let me know. The next day, I had breakfast and then caught up with Esther after a year and a half. Ever since Morgan and I went to see her in Idaho, ages ago, we haven't really talked that much, so I was quite anxious to figure out why that was. So yeah, finally found out, and we caught up for a time, and it was very good. Glad we're back in touch. After that, I wrote down more philosophical meta thoughts for about 2 hours until my brain gave up, and I watched some anime to rejuvenate it. From there, I drove to Teamutu to have dinner with Mr. Height. It was kind of hectic because he has 5 hyper girls and 1 hyper little boy. The boy is the youngest, and I can say I do feel sorry for him with 5 older sisters. You're going to have a rough life, kid, but push through. I believe in you. So yeah, Mr. Height and I just cut up on life, talked a little about theology and philosophy, and overall it was good. Once I got back, I did even more philosophical writing, and then I watched anime until I went to sleep. The next day, began with ramen, and then me writing down more meta thoughts. I then watched some more anime, and went and got groceries and gas in Cambridge, and then switched back and forth between working on my paper and watching anime. The majority of the time was spent on watching anime, I must confess. The next day was just as chill as the day before. I alternated between working on my paper and watching anime. This time I spent the majority of the time being productive, for sure. I would say that I worked on my paper for at least 5 hours. However, I also spent some time updating the death note that will go out to key figures in my social circles 2 years after I die, should the Gmail still exist. That's right, I have a contingency plan in place to send out a message if my Gmail account has been inactive for two years. And ironically, I haven't written a will yet, though. So, anyway. Not like I have much not like I have much to give out or say in one, with a will. But yeah, it's been something like 2 years since I had written that old message, and it was supposed to go, that was supposed to go out if I died. And so I figured it was time to update that bad boy. And yeah, other than that, the day was as described. The next day I got only 4 hours of sleep because I stayed up for ages thinking. I then I woke up fairly early to drive to Bo's house. So from there we could drive to Auckland so we can meet up with some of Bo's friends. And from there, drive to paintball. The drive to Auckland was pretty great. We listened to music and got to sing, which was fun. I then met the friends of Bo's friends, and that was okay. They were decent. After that, we journeyed to paintball. It was mega lame. Granted, I've only had one paintball experience to go off, but by comparison to that place, this place sucked. First off, the paintball guns were really weak, and it hardly hurt to get shot by them. Second, they wouldn't shoot anywhere near straight, so the only method of hitting anyone was spray and pray. But they charge 13.4 cents per paintball. So to shoot 7 shots is to spend $1. So that makes spray and pray a very costly method, which of course is their intention. But worst of all the arenas were horribly built and horribly thought through, such that most of the time was spent respawning. which, wasn't legal. And when it wasn't legal, not responding was not enforced. AKA, you shoot your opponents and they did nothing. Not only because it didn't kill them, but because they wouldn't even acknowledge they get hit because it didn't hurt bad enough. So yeah, overall, just a mega lame experience. But at least I didn't get any welts, so that's a plus. After paintball, most of the people disbanded, but Bo's two friends took us out for dinner. It was at that point I started feeling sick and got a runny nose. So from there, we drove back, just listening to Bo's rock, which I didn't love, but I didn't hate. There were a few songs that were okay. Then, once we were back at Bo's house and decided to agree to do it, I watched through, even though I wasn't feeling good at this point, I sat with Bo and watched through the new Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and honestly, it was so bad. Like, hardly entertained, not to speak, of the quality of the show itself. I restate that anime is just objectively better than any kind of movies often being produced today. After that finally ended, I drove home and sickly crawled into bed to sleep. The next morning, I felt garbage. All that proceeded to be done with great lethargy and in the following order. I watched anime for an hour, worked on my big paper for 2 hours, did nothing for 2 or 3 hours as I was just too tired, and then I slept for 3 hours or so. Then, once I woke from my fitful slumber, I watched anime for 2.5 hours until, once again, I was tired and I fell back asleep for ages. The next day, I cleaned my room very slowly due to my sick condition. I was supposed to leave the arc the day before, but I just wasn't feeling up to it, so I asked Dave if I would be all right for me to stay an extra day, and he said it would. But now I had expended my extra day, so I felt the pressure to move out. And since the nice people of the arc, wanted their room back. So yeah, over the course of 2 or so hours, I eventually got it done, which normally would have taken me like half an hour. From there, I went over to Glen and Mags, where I was greeted with a very nice place to stay. Honestly, having my own little place, with a kitchen especially, just felt like a slice of heaven at that point in the journey. Thus, inspired by my potential to cook, I then went out and bought $250 worth of groceries and cooking utensils in hope of pursuing my culinary dreams. However, I will say at this point, I'm fairly confident my culinary dreams will forever go unrealized, because cooking is a lot harder than I thought it would be. Once I got back to the house, I cooked 8 pieces of bacon and then mixed the grease with chicken broth, which I then boiled down to make essence of meat juice, and I put that on rice. See, I have no idea if it was any good. All I could taste was a hint of meat, which, given how much essence of meat I put on the rice, I'm quite confident the true flavor was much more than just a hint. But hey, whatever, I made myself a hearty meal, and that's what matters. From there, I watched some anime, wrote the intro to this life email, and then got a bit more anime in before going to sleep. The next morning, I felt better, but not good. I didn't feel as sick as the day before, but I still felt super sapped for energy and just kind of trudged around everywhere. Also, I've officially developed a new way for testing how sick you are, and the test is performed by squirting a bunch of lemon on your tongue. The less you taste, the sicker you are. And, well, at the start of the day, I could hardly taste anything. By the end, I could taste about 20% normal capacity. Thus, at the start of the day, I would say I was 95% sick, and by the end of the day, I was only 80% sick. See how useless this test is? It allows you to rigorously scientifically quantify your sickness. I know. Don't give me all your praise and adoration at once. As for how I spent that whole day, well, I basically watched anime, worked on my paper, and went on very short walks in between. But I will admit, the ratio of anime paper writing fell in anime's favor, so my productivity that day was low. I also decided that I would try cooking for myself the breaded bacon, but that was a flop. I mean, I couldn't really taste it, but the texture was definitely worse than normal bacon. The next morning, I felt significantly better, and by the end of the day, basically felt normal. The whole day was spent just watching anime, working on my paper. However, I did also cook myself some chicken, and that was cool, because I started to taste it. However, at this point in time, it was the 4th day of me not doing anything social or seeing anyone, and I began to notice some concerning behavior. So it turns out, if I don't get sufficient social interaction, I may or may not start talking to myself in weird voices. I just vocalize my thought process in unpredictable ways. And often, more than I would care to admit, also in song. The degree to which I sympathize with musicals has grown astronomically. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that's just what social starvation looks like for me, because I noticed I started doing it toward the tail end of my time with the Varleys as well. While I was there, at least. I went a few days without seeing anyone. See, it's not as if I mind the behavior per se, I just find it slightly concerning. But, whatever. The only one who sees me is me, and that way there's only me to judge myself. I say that, but I'm sure someday someone will just walk in on me musically narrating my actions while I do dishes or something, and then I'm just going to be terribly embarrassed. The last thing that happened that day was I finally finished the contradiction cases for my paper, which was a huge chunk of work. At that moment, the paper is sitting around 24,000 words and 66 pages. So I made significant progress for sure. It felt so good to be done with that section. The next morning, I worked on my paper for an hour and a half before watching a bit of anime, then going to meet up with Michael for a prearranged meetup. Originally, we were going to go to thrift stores and dress each other up and wear those outfits in public while we did arcade games and stuff. But Michael's dad did not approve of the idea, so we ended up just doing arcade games. But still, that was pretty great. I showed Michael his first escape room, and I think he really enjoyed it. And he also did really well, too. He's really good at solving puzzles. Then, other than that, we got smoothies and played a ton of arcade games, which, man, are far more pricey than I remember arcade games being. But, even with the price, I think it was worth it. Michael used his haul of tickets to cash in for a bunch of candy, and I got these, flourishing rocks, which I have no use for, and will never see flourish. So, took some quality arcade prizes home. Then we came back, and I had food with the first before Michael and Taylor left for youth group. I then stuck around for 30 minutes more, playing table tennis with Rissy, which, was good. And then I headed back and binged anime till 11:30 before going to bed. Next morning, I woke up and straight worked on my paper till about 4 in the afternoon, with a break for breakfast. I then drove to Jordan's house, and we kind of just got ready for a bit before grabbing Burger Food burgers. They had these really cool unzipping boxes, which I thought were actually great. I hereby declare that all burgers ought to have unzipping boxes. And then from there, we did a few more odd errands. Jordan helped Julia out for a bit, and while he did that, I witnessed a drug drop on the other side of the street, which was slightly concerning. And then we left. The whole way to Julia's dad's place, we played worship songs and sang those, and that was nice. Then once we got there, we attempted to play dominoes, which was mega lame, before talking to Julia's grandpa and grandma. Then we got into how light/quantum computing works for the next few hours. Once 11:30 or so hit, we went to bed, and though I didn't actually get till 1:30 or so, that meant I got 5 or so hours of sleep before waking up at 6:30 the next day. From there, we drove to Waihi and got riding along this river path. However, it was mega cold, so, our hands for biking in the morning, and neither of us were wearing gloves, so that just super sucks. Our hands just froze. We then biked for 2 hours and went through a lot of places I remember us biking through on our first journey, which was super cool and nostalgic. There's this ruins of something. I don't know what it was, but I know I saw it in the journey all those years back. And, I might actually be able to dredge up one of Petra's old pictures of it. Let me see if I can do that. Oh, look, there's me from the journey way back. But out to the mission at hand. I realized that Petra was only on the second journey, and the ruins were from the first journey, so rip. Anyway, here's a picture of the ruins I saw. And here's a picture of the kilometer-long tunnel, which we went through back in the day. However, while I would normally move on from this point, I got a bit of a nostalgia hit from viewing all those early journey photos, so I think I'm going to go back through all of Petra's documentation and just vibe for a bit. More than that, though, I'll include some pictures here so you can all just understand how amazing the journey was. Journey montage! This is Yarnin, one of our leader dudes who's looking very swag. And here's all the girls, which I'll have you know, I talked to all of them, thus transcending 17-year-old norms. The massive. The woman on the far left is Jess, and the fourth from the left is Katie, and both had a massive impact on me as they taught me how to actually listen, which was monumentally a game changer for the rest of my life. Petra liked Ben at the time, so there were a disproportionately large number of pictures of him. Thus, I'm only going to include one, but just know that Ben is a lad. Oh, and there's Joel Bartran, which I'm still in contact with today, and he's also a lad. Look at Joel. That's his finest. You're welcome, Joel, for that flattering picture. Also, this is just ironic, but see the traffic cone on top of the van? Yeah, that was 7. The joke began with an obtuse number of 7s rolled in the game of Catan at the start of the journey, but it grew into much, much more than that. I will continue to document 7 throughout the journey, because we actually carried him the whole way, and he's basically our spirit animal. There's 7. Here's Hayden getting the car ready for a long biking trip on the back of the journey. We biked for ages, but, I was a fitness god back then, so I was at the front of the pack literally the entire time. You underestimate how, biking fit I was during that time in my life. Here's biking. Look at that. People walking their bikes. Weak. I never walked my bike. I'm actually not sure if that's true, but I don't remember walking my bike, so we'll just pretend that means I never did, okay? After a day of biking, we arrived at where we were staying for the night and set up camp. Here's me with my boy Daniel. Daniel used to be really quiet, but we, came to be good friends over the journey, and we stuck together almost the whole time, actually. This is our, evening view, and man, that was a good view. Oh, gosh, man, that really is a good view. Look at Elkin and Hayden having that experience in the rain. Hayden looks like he's having such a better time. Next day, we continued our journey on foot. And, of course, with 7 in tow. And we kept hiking. We did a handstand for some trivial reason I can't remember. Jumped a river. And took a break because we've been hiking for ages. And then we kept hiking for ages. Eventually, we made it to this sheep shearing place where me and the real men slept in this, cave area we found. Which was really cool, honestly. And yeah, look at that. I'm so photogenic. Look at that beautiful face. Then the next day we hiked a lot more and had a lot of great conversations on these hikes, by the way. And basically, you just go from hiking beside person to person and just talk. Very formative. Here's us standing on top of a crested mountain. And from there, thanks only to a yeet scrawled in the ground, we came and joined the other half of the group and made it to the camp just before we got dark. That night, there was a running "Night, Alex" joke, which really wasn't funny, but we're all really tired, so of course anything is funny then. And the next day, we hiked even more. I was clearly engrossed in some, enlightening conversation when that pic was taken. We then went through a river cave, but Petra was majorly freaked out, so no pictures were taken of that. And, at one point, the water was up to our neck, so, yeah, with a foot of space above us, so understandably, I get why she was excited, and why we didn't have pictures. I was just actually pumped, though. And then we returned to our home base from which we set out, having conquered a significant part of the journey. Look at 7. It's still there. And that was when 7 was given its resting place atop a nearby hill, and so remains so to this day, or at least so I suspect. Look at this face. Tell me you don't love Dale Dax after seeing that face. We then returned to the lodge, all feeling as Joel's face depicts. And thereafter, Nate got baptized. And clearly, he still has work to do because he's the one who didn't let Elkin and I go to the journey to see people. Like, what the heck, man? We're on the same journey. You can't do that to us. And there you have it. The journey in a nutshell. Honestly, I've been surprised by just how much I remember from when I was 16 or 17. Like, I really do remember quite a bit. And surprisingly, I actually see the things as if, they're the same after I remember them like 5 years ago. I kind of expect my memories to be like systematically wrong, like they were for the memories like 5 years back when I was 16. But instead, it seems like around 16, 17 is when your mind really starts to like develop. Most of the way where you see things largely become, fixed. I guess that just really means I've reached my final stages of development, and that's all maintenance from here. Kind of crazy to think about that, if I'm honest. Anyway, everything was like I remembered, and it was really cool to see it all again. Unfortunately, the tunnels we hiked through way back then, called the Window Walk, were closed, so we didn't get to go see those again, which was really sad. The other big bummer that happened is we began biking back, is it quickly became apparent that the difference between going slightly downhill and slightly uphill is a very large difference over long periods of time. Hence, Jordan, who is not in good biking condition, could not keep up with the uphill terrain. Thus, since we both had to be back in Hamilton by 1:30 for different reasons, Jordan and I decided it would be best if we split up, and I booked it back and then came back with the car. And this is what we did, and I seriously pushed myself on the way back. I was very, very tired by the time I made it back, but, also glad to see I still have that fighting spirit in me. Thus, after finagling with a bike rack and a few other things, I started driving down to pick up Jordan. But halfway there, I realized his gas light was on and he was almost out of gas, hence thinking he had, been siphoned, because it's a pretty common phenomenon in New Zealand. I pulled a UE and made it back in town to put some gas in the tank. However, all that took a bit of time, and something I forgot to mention, Jordan's phone was dead, so there's no way to contact him, so to let him know what I was up to. So assuming he was still waiting at the place we designated, I drove back down the canyon, and while I was on the way down, I just happened to spot him out of the corner of my eye, biking up the other side of the road. So eventually I got turned around, was able to pick him up, and everything worked out. But it was still pretty fortunate I saw him, because we could have otherwise, almost certainly been late. Then, after being reunited with Jordan, we both, and both of our legs being dead, we grabbed some fish and chips at Jordan's old stomping grounds. He then had me eat a meat pie, which wasn't great, but it was still better than I remembered. After that, after that all transpired, we drove back to his house listening to music along the way. Thankfully, we made it there with a few minutes to spare, and I was able to make Stefan's birthday party on time. As for that event, that was just a ton of socializing. Not that I minded that. There was one guy there, Christopher, that I really felt like I clicked with, and we had a really fun dynamic. Plus, later on, I got to talk about metaphysics, so that was also good. At the end of the night, we played Secret Hitler, which is basically just Mafia, but less killing, and that was all right. One guy kind of controlled the game, and I don't know, it definitely felt a bit beholden to chance, so I didn't really like that all that much, but still, it wasn't bad. By the time that was over, I was pretty tired, so after Stefan assisted me with probably the most complex backing job I've ever performed, I then drove home and slept. The next morning, I took the liberty to sleep in, ate some food while watching some anime, and then just continued watching anime throughout the day with, 2-hour breaks or so to work on this life email. I also spent about an hour experimenting with cooking while listening to What God Is Not. However, since there was one event that occurred later that day, that will scar me for life, and because of its immense significance, I've detailed it in Life Update intro form. Thus, for those of you that made this far, enjoy a second Life Update intro, and the tale of the dastardly light bulb. I flick on the switch as I step into the door. 2 lights in the room come alive, but then, in a second, and with a little pop of a last breath, the second one flickers out. I shrug my shoulders, close the door behind me, and start putting my groceries away. Looks like the light's dead, I think to myself as I open the fridge. I'll fix that tomorrow. Tomorrow comes, and I walk through that same door, 2 light bulbs in hand. Well, this is pretty cheap, I thought, pulling up my chair and going to unscrew the light bulb. Easy enough, I mutter to myself. The light bulb doesn't budge. I scowl and crane my head, as if peering into the light bulb. And I might scold it for not turning on what it's supposed to. Must be stuck. My hand grasps the light bulb tighter, and I give it a more robust turn. Still nothing. Man, it's really stuck in there, I think, craning my head once again, the furrow on my brow deepening. I set my jaw and latch on the light bulb with 2 hands. Nothing a little more force can't fix, I resolve, and I give it another twist. This time the light bulb spins. My expression relaxes as I, finish unscrewing the bulb. A bit of elbow grease works every time, I think to myself, as the bulb comes loose. I stare blankly at what resides in my hand. Where's the part that actually screws in? I ask myself as I examine the glass bulb. There are trace amounts of glue where the metal threading should be. I look up at the socket, and sure enough, the metal piece is still right where I left it. I glance back down at the glass bulb in my hand with a look of betrayal, and then toss the thing in the trash can nearby. With a frustrated puff, I climb off my chair and walk briskly out the door. It closes behind me. A minute or so later, the door is thrust open, and the tool of conquest is in my hand. Pliers. I once more mount my chair and begin my assault on the broken light bulb. I clasp hold of it and twist. It doesn't budge. I blink twice, check my right hand rule to make sure I'm not turning it the wrong way, and then assail it again. Once again, it doesn't budge. What? I mutter aloud, confusion thick on my breath. I unscrew the little shade that guards the light fixture and peer at the 2 little knobs that are keeping the light bulb in place. It all seems fine, I thought to myself, and I tried grabbing the metal once more, with my pliers, this time twisting the metal so hard it crumples. Still nothing. What the... I change up my angle and fix the pliers to the pin itself this time, and yank. The bulb's husk remains fixed. Why isn't this working? I growled to myself as I give it another go. This goes on for about 15 or more minutes, punctuated by long, vexed silences where I carefully examine the mechanism. I furiously use my AI-powered research app in a desperate attempt to figure out why the bulb won't unscrew, until finally, after turning the metal part of the bulb into a crumpled amalgamation of aluminum and suffering, I collapsed like a rag doll into my seat. There was nothing more to be done. Somehow the light bulb's base must be fused to the socket, or something along those lines, because it was so stuck in there that no amount of force, save the sort that would break the socket itself, could wrench it free. I had tried my best, but some problems can't be fixed. Flash forward 6 hours as I'm sitting in my bed working on writing the rest of this massive McGrew paper. My phone screen lights up, and I look down to see a message from Mags. I flick open the phone and look at her response to my description of the situation. The text reads, "They're bayonet fittings, and so to get them out, you push them in and turn a quarter turn. They should pop out." I roll my eyes a little. Like I didn't try that, I muttered to myself. I stretch and get out of bed. Still, I should probably get one more shot so I can tell her I tried. I lazily climb up on the chair and give my good old friends the pliers and grab the metal. I push the piece up, twist it a quarter turn to the left, and it slides out. I stare at the free threading of the bulb for a few minutes, dumbfounded. I look to the bulb, then up to the socket, then back to the bulb. Huh, I whispered to myself, and I slowly slipped down from the chair and dropped the bent and battered aluminum into my palm. I look at it for a few more seconds. It is now clear to me that I am, in fact, an idiot. I realize as I nod sagely and toss the proof of the matter into the trash. That's right! I could not figure out how to unscrew a light bulb. I think I'm so thoroughly convinced of my great intelligence that I managed to forget how I am a genuine idiot. I spent around half an hour trying to unscrew a light bulb, and not only that, but even after half an hour, I still could not figure out how to do it. During that time, I used pliers, a nail, researched how to unscrew light bulbs, looked at the locking mechanism only to eventually give up, thinking the bulb must be fused to its socket. But no, the bulb was not fused after all. Rather, there were 2 notches that required you to push them up, and then turn them. Push, then turn. An equation that defeated my oh-so-great mind. And it's not like I didn't see those notches. It's not like I didn't even understand what they did or how they worked, yet for some reason it didn't even cross my mind, knowing how those notches worked, to push the light bulb up and then try and turn it. I literally could not figure out how to unscrew a light bulb. How many Alexes does it take to unscrew a light bulb? Wrong! Alexes can't unscrew light bulbs, apparently. Ugh. You cannot know how utterly embarrassing it is to not be able to figure out how to unscrew a light bulb. This is the height of stupidity. I cannot think of a task more widely regarded as the epitome of simplicity. This is why we have so many jokes about unscrewing light bulbs. It's not even like I haven't done this before. I have unscrewed and rescrewed light bulbs before, yet for some reason, I could not figure out, for the life of me, how to unscrew a light bulb. This will forever scar my consciousness. Every achievement of intelligence, every accolade of mental prowess, every compliment I ever received from now on shall forever be tarnished and haunted by the memory of that blasted light bulb. Congratulations, Alex, you won the Nobel Prize. I smile joyfully as I accept the trophy of my great accomplishments, but deep within me a small voice whispers menacingly, "But you couldn't unscrew a light bulb." I can't believe that actually happened. I actually feel so dumb. I feel like this is God just trying deliberately to humble me. He's up there Alex has got kind of cocky as of late with all his philosophy and getting all those good grades. Let's see how he handles this. Cut to me furiously trying to unscrew a light bulb. All right, okay. All right, for reals. I think I've got that mostly out of my system. It's okay. There are tough realities in life we all have to come to accept. The Holocaust was real. Nuclear bombs could cause the world to end at any moment. Some of us are too dumb to unscrew a light bulb. That's just how it is. There's no use dwelling on it. You see me casually unscrewing and rescrewing in light bulbs, almost as if practicing my light bulb unscrewing skills. We all have just to live with uncertainties and realities, We have to let some things go. That's just how it is. Subtly unscrews and rescrews a 1/48th miniature scale light bulb resting in the palm of his hand. That's just how life is. So yeah, I think I learned an important lesson about myself. In the cases where I think I know how to do something, like the back of my hand, I will become extremely narrow-minded. Essentially, I'm so convinced I know what I'm doing that when it doesn't work, all that says to me is, you're not trying hard enough. It didn't even cross my mind that I might, in fact, be wrong about how the task should be approached and, investigate an alternative approach. I'm glad I learned this about myself, because that could be a very relevant fact for the future. But man, was it a painful lesson. Anyway, moving on from light bulbs. The next day, I was able to spend the first 2 hours wallowing in self-disappointment, because not going to lie, not being able to screw a light bulb was definitely a bit of a crushing experience. I then decided I needed to do something to break me out of my funk, so I drove to Arapuni, the rural place that Kristen-sized cottages, and thus the general area in which I lived at one point in time, and decided to walk my old running trails. Here's a picture of the Arapuni swing bridge from my youth. Boop. And then I walked along my old running trails, and man, I was so fit back in the day. Like, I used to run those trails with all their inclines and switchbacks, and I ran them pretty fast, if I remember right. But besides realizing how much I used to be a fitness god, it was cool to just go back over the trails. Such a beautiful place to run. Man, here, let me see if I can get some pictures to capture it. Just show you the trails I was on. They're honestly so pretty. Yeah, absolutely fantastic trails. I think I walked like 20 kilometers or so, just walking on little trails. And the whole time, I just thought about things. It was really good. Once I got back, I cooked some beef and orange juice, teriyaki, and then chicken broth, respectively. And then I taste tested them with my connoisseur's palate. I deemed teriyaki chicken the best. I then worked on this life demo and managed to get the new light bulbs in, thanks to Mag's text, and I went over the first for dinner. Once I got back, I did more life demo work, and then I watched anime until I went to bed. I then worked on my massive paper all morning upon waking. I then watched a bit of anime before going over to Cape and Ray and strolling across the old stomping grounds. That was a blast from the past. Cape and Ray's changed a bit, honestly, but mostly the same. Here's the pictures. Boop. Oh, and here's the trees we used to play World Cup with. Oh, and there's also the resource forum where my table tennis skills were first formed. Many intense table tennis game was played on that malformed table. While I was meandering around, I met up with Werner and Joel's mom, and it was a pretty surface level chat, but good nonetheless. I think I was there for like an hour in total. Cape Rain is honestly pretty small, so, I saw the whole campus before long, and that nostalgia is fairly easy to satiate. After that, I drove into Cambridge and got some macys before going home and watching some more anime, and then doing some more work on my massive paper. It was this point that I finally finished all the content, meaning aside from editing, I had finally finished. You have no idea how good that felt. Like, man, that was such a big project. The paper ended up being approximately 32,000 words and 80 pages long, so an absolute behemoth in length and also in quality. Probably my finest work so far. I'm very proud of myself. After that, I watched some anime in triumph and then slept because I was tired. The next day consisted of editing the previously aforementioned massive paper, and then when, you write at my level, that means there's a lot of editing that needs to be done. Still, I think I cleaned up pretty well. Around 5 or so, I then met up with Bo and the First Boys, and we embarked on a journey to Kerosene Creek for some hot spring experiences. And honestly, it was really cool. Like, the moon was shining through the mist of the waterfall and the heat, and man, it looked so cool. Unfortunately, the water was just about the same temperature as when William and I went, so kind of tepid. But we still had a great time, and I really enjoyed it. Once we got back, I watched one episode of anime and then crashed. The next day, I spent like 6 hours straight just finishing up the editing process, and then then I for realsies finished the paper, and that was a mega beautiful moment. Absolute conquest and roar cries. I'm glad I was filled with such overwhelming triumph because I then proceeded to have a very hard conversation with Jordan. See, Jordan and I have had a lot of conversations prior, but I wasn't like upfront or blunt about my thoughts about his relationship. And yeah, it was hard for me to do that, especially because I was supposed to be the best man at his wedding. And so I didn't really feel like I could turn him down or tell him how I really felt. So yeah, but at this point I worked up the courage and gusto to be like, hey, we need to talk. So yeah, that was rough, but honestly, Jordan handled it really well. I'm very glad we had that conversation because honestly, it was a really good. As a friendship where you can be honest is one like that actually matters. And I know after that, I definitely respect him for and value our relationship much more significantly. But yeah, definitely tough. However, afterward, since we didn't want to leave it there, we decided to play some Halo, and unfortunately, Jordan's controllers didn't work, so I was a rip. So instead, we decided to go and do an escape room, which was a really good escape room, by the way. Like, probably the highest quality escape room I've done as far as realism goes. It was a murder mystery, and man, it was a little too realistic, to be honest. Plus, there were lots of, like, red herrings, which I never see done in escape rooms. It's, like, a very different experience when you don't have to, like, just find the parts of the puzzle. We have to find out which parts of the puzzle are relevant and how. Totally stuffed us off both at the start, but we actually got the hang of it and, like, got in a roll and plowed through that room. Honestly, very impressive for both of our performances. From there, we went and played some arcade games, but we only got to do a few since the arcade closed. And thereafter, we drove around on electric scooters for like an hour and a half at night. And that was a really great time. I really enjoyed that, especially because we got to go to all my old running trails, which made it way better. Very good time. Though, the one downside was both of our hands got really cold as, it was night, and you have to have your hands exposed to use the throttle. But, regardless, it was a good time, and probably my favorite New Zealand experience. Once I got home, I did so quite late, so I just crashed. The next day, I did a bunch of cleaning, since my time in Glenn and Mag's house was coming to an end. I then made some food while listening to What God Is Not. From there, I went over to Joel's house and had some pretty good conversations. We talked about quite a few things, and Joel had some really interesting insights on earning people's respect, so I kept that in mind for quite some time. We also took the 16 personality MBTI test. The first time I've taken it in like 5 years now, because it's dead. Since its death. And crazy enough, I got the same type as I got back in the day, ENTJ. A lot of individual percentiles were more moderate, but, the fact I got the same type was pretty surprising to me. Like, I intentionally answered according to Alex 2.0 standards, so I don't think I was just, like, playing the test. But I still got an ENTJ, so I didn't really expect that. From there, I went over to Jordan's house for his birthday party, and that was tolerable. Julie and I just don't match super well, so that made it a bit rough. But I will say she does know how to lay out a spread. Like, man, very good food. Plus, Jordan bought 2 giant pizzas, which was fantastic. The night consisted of a lot of small talk, which is the 5 of us in total. And I did enjoy the other guy that came. He was at least nice. But yeah, not the best birthday party I've been to by any metric, but it was still chill. And I was well fed, so I was enjoyable enough. The next morning, I spent largely over at Glenn and Meg's house. Philip works at a donut shop, so I got to eat a passion fruit flavored donut, which he brought back, which was an experience. Not a bad one, mind you, but definitely strange. I also helped Philip with some math, which he was struggling on. It just so happened that the same algebra concept I worked with Grace on last semester was the ones he was working through. So fortunately, that meant I had good experience in teaching it. Though I will say, Philip got it so much faster than Grace. From there, I followed the Johnson family to Hamilton Lake, where we got a good meal and had some ice cream before doing an escape room together. I don't know, that experience was so-so. I definitely love escape rooms, but I didn't really get in the groove for this one, and I felt like I wasn't really a big player in it, so that made it less enjoyable. With that, I parted ways with the Johnsons and left for Auckland. The drive there was nice, very refreshing. Once I got there, I went straight to pick up my computer from the repairman that was working and tried to fix it, but he didn't actually finish it on time, so that was rough. So I ended up paying for his time, like 250 New Zealand dollars, but he didn't actually ask for that. I just, understand where he's coming from. Like, sometimes you can't get the job done, but that doesn't mean you didn't deserve a fair wage. So yeah, Denis is a very interesting man. As such, I think he deserves a paragraph, or 7. First off, the place where Denis was to be found was an old and hobbled storefront. If the sign had ever been replaced, it had been decades ago, and the same could be said of what the shop had been last cleaned. It was as if Smog had decided to hoard computers instead of gold, and Denis was his real estate agent preparing for his next nest. There was hardly a place to sit, much less place a stand in the establishment, and while I found the environment repulsive at first, the impression it gave me slowly morphed into something more like a euphemistic take. By the time I left, I found it quirky, to be more apt. The more I got to know Denis, the more I became convinced this man is incapable of being repulsive, and thus I had no choice but to alter my perception of the place in which he lived. Now for Denis, there is nothing endearing about his old and tattered body. His eyes are turning white, and, you could see blindness setting in, and his right arm hung limp at his side. Also, his smile seemed to think that teeth were an unnecessary accessory. But nevertheless, from that smile leaked a soul that defied time, and was determined to be as young as it wished to be. Inside, he wasn't even close to dead. The husky he was wearing couldn't fool me for a second. Denis welcomed me enthusiastically and proceeded to regale me with tale after tale of computers and their happenings ever since their very beginning. He was in university when computers first came out, and he remembers, before the CEO of Microsoft was a big deal, walking down to that university for a lecture and being given, a handshake with Microsoft's founder, and then having a light conversation with him. That's how long he's been at this. He saw the internet birth and grew alongside it, and all the way until now, he utilizes AI in his day-to-day life. I got to hear Denis speak as if it was when I got to hear Denis speak, it was as if the entirety of technological history had swirled and stewed and then settled within his bones. The past itself has been tattooed upon his skin, and even that which everyone else had forgotten, he remembered. I genuinely felt as if I met a sage, like a solitary man who had come to know secrets no others could know, and yet nevertheless understood the times in which he lived. He hadn't become a relic, a man stuck in the past, but instead he lived in the present in such a way that the past had no choice but to come along with it. Honestly, Denis is probably the first person to which age equated for wisdom for me. This man understood computers from the ground up in a way I'm not sure anyone who has not lived through it even could. And after just an hour of conversation, I've decided Denis is a venerable computer demigod. And honestly, I'm pretty sad he's so old, because I'm not sure he'll be around when I come back. But I would really like to sit at his feet and learn from him. So yeah, there you go. Denis, the random computer man. Clearly, he made quite the impression on me. After I finished picking up my still broken computer from Denis, because the part that needed to be replaced never came, because New Zealand shipping sucks, I then went over to William's house and hung out with him and his flatmates till about 1:30 in the morning. I played a game of chess with QQ and got crushed, then played some Mario Kart and got crushed, and then watched Silent Voice, and it was beautiful. Contrary opinions, got crushed. Honestly, that movie is so well done. The one dude who disagreed clearly has no taste or class. After the movie finished, we went on to talk about some stuff, and then I fought against William QQ and Peter in an anime quiz, and I would have won by a landslide, but I told William if he got one anime right, he would win. And so William, being the conniving man he is, just yelled, "Attack on Titan!" every single time, and of course eventually he was right. So technically he won. Emphasis on technically. There is no other conceivable sense in which he won. From there, William and I decided it would be good to get 2 hours of sleep before we left for the airport, but unfortunately falling asleep is not one of my skill sets, so I more like closed my eyes for 2 hours. I then drove us to the airport, and for the first time, significantly drove on the wrong side of the road, which majorly freaked out William, but there were no cars coming the other way, or cops watching me, so the mistake was without consequences. From there, we said tired goodbyes, and I began my long, sleepless journey through the world of the airport. From there, I maneuvered my way through the airport entry processes, and finally got on my flight at 6:30 in the morning, which means that I pulled an all-nighter the second time in my lifetime, but last time I had caffeine, and this time I didn't, which makes quite the difference. I then got a little bit of restful sleep on my flight, I would say around 3 hours, and from there I spent the time until I could check into my hotel, staying quite awake and exploring Sydney, and here's what I saw. First off, trains. Trains are glorious, and very efficient. I totally forgot that until I was back in Australia, but I really like trains. Although, I do feel like an idiot because I forgot you could flip the seat around to match the direction of travel, so I ended up sitting backward the whole time, and I'm sure I looked dumb to everybody. Here's pictures of trains. From there, I went and saw the iconic bridge and opera house from a distance, mostly out of tourist obligation rather than, genuine interest, but here's the proof. And from there, I spent the next 2 or so hours exploring the botanical gardens right in the city. And there was a really nice park. Like, isn't the contrast cool? Like, they had all these ancient trees and there's just buildings, like skyscrapers. From there, I visited a very old library, which has got to be the quietest library I've ever been in. Like, holy cow, just pulling back my seat, my clothes rustling, like, as I sat down was an auditory transgression against the totalitarian silence that governed that library. But yeah, that library looked very classically library. From there, I went to this cafe in the middle of the gardens and bought overpriced fish and chips. But man, they were good fish and chips. I'm pretty confident they're the best fish and chips I've ever had. Thereafter, I went to the classic park fountain area in the middle of the city, which everyone goes to. Oh, and I went to the most impressive Catholic cathedral I've ever been to. That was cool, too. I've never been in such, like, a reverence-inspiring building before. Like, stepping inside a cathedral like that just instills holiness in your veins. Like, when I'm in some place like that, I just have, like, this deep ache to become Catholic. Like, I very much just want this to be mine. Like, this cathedral and all those within it just be something I'm a part of I can call my own. As it stands, though, I'm a trespasser, just a vagrant, wandering through a sacred space. From there, I wandered around the city some more. I saw this, which was a Church of Scientology by a Baptist church, or not, well, just a normal church, which is kind of funny, which is a good contrast. And then, once I finally stalled long enough, I went to check in my hotel, which didn't let you check in until 2 in the afternoon, see. I decided to book this capsule hotel, which is pretty unique in that you get to sleep in these little pods, and that's your whole room. And here, let me show you some pictures. Pods. It was definitely weird since all the rooms were mixed gender, so below my pod was a girl's pod, and honestly, by the time I checked in, I didn't care though, because I slept so hard. Then, after 13 hours of sleep, I woke at 3 in the morning and just watched all the drunk people and high people down the streets below for a few minutes. Honestly, significantly less entertaining than I thought it would be, but I had some time to kill, so I underwent the task. I then ventured out in this mentally impaired landscape because apparently it's against natural reason or natural law that reasonable, insane people will wander the streets every in the morning. And after avoiding some annoyed drunks, I managed to order breakfast at macys. From there, I made it over to the train station and hopped on the train. I then somehow proceeded to miss my stop and go too far, and then I had to get off, wait for the train going the other direction, and then, of course, I didn't really mind that, though, because I had ages before my flight left. Eventually, I made it to the airport, and everything went smoothly until I actually got on the flight, at which point I found that some lady had plopped herself down in my seat, and when I was perplexed about this, she demanded / pseudo-asked that I switch seats with her. And since I'm an agreeable person, I didn't really have a strong preference, I was like, yeah, all right. And so I sat down in her seat, and she took mine. However, as time wore on, it turned out the flight crew needed that seat that she stole from me for some alternate purpose, and thus she would need to be reassigned. But at that point, she suddenly became very adamant that the seat she was in was not, in fact, her seat, and it was mine. She pointed out to the flight attendant, she pointed me out to the flight attendant and told them that the seat that she was in was actually my seat, and I had taken hers. Of course, with no mention that she had been the one that demanded we switch seats in the first place. And I'm not gonna lie, that kind of bugged me. Like, I get wanting to sit in another seat away from people. I can think of decent justifying reasons one might be a bit pushy about taking a seat from someone who's it's genuinely assigned to. Like, sure, it's kind of rude, but like maybe she was having a bad day, or maybe she had bad experiences with, the past seatmates. I don't know. But then to yeet the kind person whose seat you stole under the bus because he was, as if he was the one who transgressed the seat assignment law, just because the seat you demanded he give up was no longer convenient for you. Now, that's deplorable. Like, what the heck, my lady? You gotta, this is how you treat people who are kind and accommodating? I think this lady increased my cynicism with which I regard others by 0.5%. Anyway, eventually the flight attendants assigned me a new seat, which ended up being a window seat, and there was no one in the middle seat. And the dude in the aisle seat was really nice. So, karma is real. And obviously the airline gods were watching. They know what the lady did, and someday you're gonna, really need to go to the bathroom, but there'll be a 5-person line. That's right. The airline gods never forget. Someday justice will be served. Here's a picture of this guy from my window seat. So yeah, the dude I got seated next to was great. We chatted some, and he was certainly the most enjoyable person I've ever shared a flight with. However, unfortunately, my stroke of good luck was not to last, as there was an engine failure just as we were about to take off. And while the mechanics did get it fixed, it made us depart an hour or so late, which meant that when we made it to Los Angeles, I had a 7-hour layover because I couldn't make my connecting flight. So that was a bit sad. I must say, there was a tangible increase in hostility and discontent going from Sydney to Los Angeles. Like, us Americans are actual jerks. Seriously, we're just majorly not as kind as, the other people groups. So yeah, I don't think I got any sleep on the plane, which meant that my time in Los Angeles was functional misery. I was forced to pull effectively a second all-nighter, and that was rough on my body. Remember, since this was the third all-nighter I pulled in my life, and the second had happened just a day ago. So yeah, I felt like garbage and had to dish out ungodly amounts of cash to feed myself, because man, airports are expensive. And then I ended up just getting 3 hours of restless sleep by laying on the ground in the corner. I'm pretty sure when God was planning out the future and airports crossed his mind, he was like, no way. I can't allow unjustified evil into the world. But then he realized that without airports, there'd be no way for the modern middle-class man to be able to truly sympathize with the homeless people. So, after a bit more thought, he said something like, I'll allow it, and, wrote it into the script. But seriously, I have so much more empathy for homeless people. If that's how it feels to be homeless, then I think homelessness is way worse than I thought it was. I then finally got on the plane to Denver and got a bit more sleep on that flight. From there, I made it back to my home state, and welcomed the familiar sight of our esteemed airport. Funny how welcoming even an airport can be when you've been out of the country for 6 weeks. And then eventually, Dad picked me up and drove me home. In the car, we caught up some. He bought me a bunch of Taco Bell tacos, and it was raining like crazy when I flew in, a very large thunderstorm. So when I made it home, the first thing I did was join Caleb, Ben, and Rebecca in wading and eventually swimming through the water at CSU. And honestly, that was pretty crazy. I've never seen CSU like that, but here's a picture. This is from some news site, and honestly, it was way deeper than that when we swam through it, like twice as deep. I could barely keep my head above water after walking down like the sidewalk in the middle. So yeah, did that, and that definitely woke me up. We ended up being told by the cops to stop, so we obliged, and then from there, Grace and I walked home while Ben, Caleb, and Rebecca went to grab their cars. I got to catch up with Grace some, and that was good. And when I finally got back, I took a necessary shower because the water was mega nasty, and then I just conked out because I was tired. Still, I only got 4 hours of sleep that night because my sleep schedule was so whacked out. I wanted to go back to sleep, I just couldn't after like an hour of trying, so I decided to just start my day and then sleep when I got tired. Hence, I got in my good old Phoenix and decided to go get gas and groceries. However, as I was driving on my way to get gas, this dude was absolutely tailing me, like very, very close. And I was going slightly over the speed limit, but clearly that wasn't enough for him. But the abnormal thing was, when I pulled off to get gas, he followed me, even though he wasn't getting gas, just so he could yell, "You suck!" out his window before continuing on his way. It's surprising how much that comment made by a total stranger, whose opinion I clearly should not value at all, stuck with me. Obviously, I rationally discounted his words, but they emotionally impacted me for the next, hour or so. The experience also drilled home the fact that us Americans are really a lower breed than the Kiwis. Anyway, I purchased what I needed, and when I got home, my weariness finally set in. I proceeded to go back to sleep for another 7 hours. Once I woke from that, I was feeling much better. From there, I then hung out and caught up with Ben. We drove to Muggs, since that's Ben's new favorite coffee shop, and Ben bought me a coffee, and we just talked, and it was pretty great. Then once we got back, Ben gave me this brand new Samsung computer for free, which is a huge blessing because my old computer isn't fixed, and this computer can actually handle my engineering software, so it would be perfect as a school computer. Plus, it looks good, so I won't be lugging around my clunky gaming computer around, and that gets you looks in class. It was then that I drove my Phoenix somewhere, and the check engine light started flashing. So once again, my car is in need of repair. Not gonna lie, I've kind of been putting it off, but I think the time has come where I have to actually open the engine and take a look. It's just most repairs that cause a misfiring cylinder could be more intense, so I was kind of hoping it was just a spark plug or something. So yeah, I bought a full new set of spark plugs and inductor coils, and so hopefully I could replace those pretty easily and all goes well. After discovering my Phoenix hates me, I then took Mom and Dad's car to take my still dead laptop to the computer repair guys, and it looks like they're going to charge me around $330 overall, so definitely a chunk, but at least cheaper than finding a new laptop. After that, we had dinner. I told a few tales, and then I worked on setting up this new computer before going to play Magic with John until 2 in the morning. And that was great. I really do enjoy playing Magic with John, because he's Oh, and he's really had some things pan out in his life right now, so I'm really pumped for him. That night, I tried for, I kid you not, 3.5 hours to fall asleep, and I actually just couldn't. Being jet-lagged sucks. So I decided I would just work on stuff from 5:30 to around 8, and by then I was actually tired, so I went to sleep. Of course, my body only allowed me 3.5 hours. I don't understand why my psychology is doing this to me. So for the rest of the day, I was sleep deprived. But I got to reconnect with Joe, and that was a very good day. We got to play a lot of Magic and also have some meta conversations, so that was really fun. Honestly, that was the whole day. We hung out for ages, 10 hours or something like that. The next day, I woke up, did a few things that needed to be done, and then Benj came over, and we caught up before playing some Magic for a few hours. He's built some nasty decks since I last saw him. Big scary. After that, we came back to the house and engaged in some episodes of Blue Lock, which I maintain is fire, and then Ben's left because he had a climbing engagement. From there, I had some food before going over to Neo's new place, also known as the House of Alan, Neo's Alan. It was still majorly cluttered, but honestly, I think the engagement will work well, as Neo and Alan kind of need each other to motivate one another. We talked about what I'd missed over the last few weeks, which honestly wasn't a whole lot, and then Neo and I played Magic until 2. We both had the same deck, which basically did the same thing. Those Neos did a little bit better, so that game took ages. I don't think it'd be a stretch to say it took 2 hours. But that was great. My sleep schedule was still whack, and Neo didn't have anything he needed to do for the next morning, so it kind of worked out well. Yet, due to the aforementioned sleep schedule wackiness, I didn't even feel tired until 3:30 in the morning, so yeah. I woke up at 11 the next day, did some small things, then began to work on the Magic suitcase. I made the center diamond, which worked out well, but took way more sheet metal than I anticipated, so probably going to have to go and buy another thing of sheet metal. I then did some VR before joining my family in the car to leave for the Wade's cabin, where we did our biannual hangout with the Macys. The drive was nice. Grace and I stayed together in the car, and once we got there, I was relaxed, but it was relaxing, but also radically uneventful. It was just a bunch of small talk until bed. Of course, I tried to go to bed at a reasonable hour, but the combination of the residual jet lag and the fact that I was, sleeping with mice climbing the walls, which also smelled really bad, made it really hard to actually get to sleep. Hence, since I learned my lesson from one night, that when I just lay in bed trying to sleep for most of 4 hours, I decided to give up and work on this life email. It was during that time that I did the journey recap, which is, which I grant isn't immediately relevant, but it was nostalgic, and it was an important part of my past, so I think it was worth including. Then, finally, once I was done with that, I then got to sleep at 4:30 that night. I only got 4 hours of sleep before the sun woke me up the next day, and I was tired, but c'est la vie. We didn't do all that much the next day either, but I did get to play some low-power spike ball, which didn't really count as playing spike ball, mind you. But it was still kind of fun. Throughout the various downtimes, I worked on this life email, and then around 10 in the afternoon, Ben came up. We were doing a bunch of songs around the campfire, because Grace and Eliana are musically talented, and then Ben showed us that you could put isopropyl alcohol on your hand and hold fire. Hence, the weeb in me wanted to get this picture. Now you can see the true philosopher. He can hold fire in his bare hands. Honestly, it looks so cool. So yeah, that was a blast. From there, Amelia and her dad told ghost stories, and I bought my creepy music into the situation, and honestly made it so much more scary. Having creepy music at your disposal can actually come in quite handy. And then from there, Amelia and I had a deep conversation, as is a Macy family vacation tradition. And then Eliana and Grace came in and crashed it because they wanted to listen in. And I mean, fair enough, but also not all conversations have to be shared, especially deep ones. That night, I fell asleep because I slept in the house because I had enough mice for the weekend, and I slept well, though I was still pretty tired upon waking. The morning, I lethargically had breakfast, worked on this email some, and then said our goodbyes and parted ways with the Macys. On the drive home, Grace started asking a lot of big questions, but I was tired, so I didn't have it in me to give her full fleshed out responses, which apparently made my responses way better because they were simple, at least according to her. Once I made it home, I worked on my suitcase while listening to podcasts. Surprisingly, it's been a fair amount of work to put this thing together. I then watched 2 episodes of Blue Lock with my parents, and that was fantastic. The scene where Chigiri breaks free of his chains, oh my gosh, pure beauty. I then did more work on this life anime before settling down to watch a few hours of anime. It's not like I necessarily set out to watch a few hours, it's just that, I started my SAR and totally got sucked in. So yeah. Yesterday I woke up at 8 to get my eye examined, and that went okay. See, I've been seeing a bunch of little floaters and things in my vision recently, and they've been growing in number over the last few months, and it's starting to get really annoying. However, since I was in New Zealand for most of the time, there wasn't really anything I could do about it, and it turns out that there still isn't really anything I could do about it. Though, this might be the case. It turns out I have an early onset of eye floaterinator thing. Essentially, this is what happens to the majority of people when they're 40, but it's happening to me when I'm 22, so that's annoying. Not harmful, so at least that's good news. But yeah, looks like I'm going to have to get used to all these little guys hanging out in my vision from now on. After learning about that, I then came back and worked more on my magic suitcase while listening to podcasts. Ben and I then went out, and he got me Qdoba, which is nice, and we got to have a good conversation as we ate. From there, Joe came and picked me up, and we went over to his new house and played on the Oculus. Man, I've got to say I've gotten seriously rusty. I failed one of the easiest Expert Plus super fast songs. It was pretty pitiful. Oh, also, given how great I was, insert subtle videos showing me doing beat super skill. Yeah, unfortunately I've fallen from very great heights. Perhaps someday though, I might return to them. From there, I participated in my first Monday night in ages, caught up with the Myers clan. We all spun on this spinning thing of death. I hurt my wrist some, and then we went over to the Myers house and played Magic until 11:30, and it was a 2.5 hour long game of insanity. Joe did his group hub deck, I played my wall deck, and honestly, they make such a good combo. Then after that, Sam and I played 9 1v1s in 45 minutes, which was great. We actually played the fastest 1v1s, and I loved it. And then, yeah, Joe drove me home, and I slept. And with that, we have caught up to the present. As it stands, this email is clocking out at a mere 17,700 words, so clearly I'm improving. And if you've made this far, I salute you. Until next time, don't die.